welcome back to the SLM podcast. Today I have the enormous pleasure of speaking to John Bell, somebody who I first met, I think, was it 21? I think 2021 at a conference I'd spoken at a couple of times, and John was attending this conference through a mutual connection, Dr. Ian McGilchrist, who's both of us admire his work enormously. Makes an awful lot of sense. And so John is a diplomat and mediator who has worked for over 30 years on Middle East politics with the Canadian government, the United Nations, and several international mediation and peace-building organisations. And he's the author of the book, How to Tame the Political Animal, The Missing Piece, which I have read about 4 or 5 times now. And I always pick up something new every time I read it, which is something, there's just something so, I don't know, when you can hold a book rather than reading something on a screen, and to be able to flick through and make notes and go back. So it's just, I just can't find the word to describe it.
You've read it more times than I have, Simon. I'm glad you like it.
Yeah, no, I do. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a mix of your personal life experience as well as your vast experience in the diplomatic world. I'm just going to get rid of these things that ping, because I find them extraordinarily annoying when they interrupt like that. But that's my admin's terrible side. Yeah. So yes, very interesting. I highly recommend people read it to get an understanding about the Middle East from your perspective, growing up there and going back to work there.
That's exactly right.
It's a fascinating insight that a lot of people will not have read, heard, seen before as they visualize it in their minds.
Well, thanks, Simon. And I think the way you've summed it up tells me that you have read the book, because that's exactly what it was about. It was about the experiences I had as a child there, having been born in Lebanon, and then having gone back as a diplomat, which was, of course, a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And all the learning that happened through all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. A not insignificant amount, I would think.
No, like all lives, I suppose. And,
Yeah.
mine involved a lot of travel and dealing with cultures both familiar and unfamiliar because of the nature of my job. But yeah, sure, there was a lot of learning. Absolutely. Yeah.
So to kind of kick off the resilience theme, with that experience, childhood experience, and then the diplomatic experience, can you kind of give a potted history of your background and how you got into the diplomatic service, and then is there one sort of defining moment in your career that really tested your resilience?
It's a great question. I became a diplomat because when I was a child, I had a fascination with a few things. I had a fascination with the Middle East. Even though I came from there, I was completely fascinated by it, much more than the rest of the members of my family. I followed the news, which was always bad, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I had this thing about the region, about its history, and about its current politics. I was just completely fascinated by it, even as a kid.
Yeah.
So, it was always a bee in my bonnet. I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back. It wasn't just a kind of longing for home, although it was that. It was also a complete fascination with ideology, identity, history, conflict.
Yeah.
It's all in me in some crazy fashion. And the other, I think, draw was, well, maybe two others, is I've also always had a real deep interest in, I don't know, let me call it larger human development, in the sense of where are we all going as a species, and what's my role here, and what's everybody, what are we doing here, in a sense, and
Yes.
and human history, and how does human history demonstrate that to us? What phases have we gone through as a species, and where are we going? And the Middle East was simply one zone for me for that.
Yeah.
And the final thing is I just like people in general, human beings, and I'm social. And therefore, diplomats, if you're not social and a diplomat, there are such things, but it's a kind of disaster. But there are diplomats who are highly almost antisocial. They could be brilliant, but in the end, diplomacy is a human craft,
Yeah.
an ability to navigate all the vagaries of being a human being, culturally and politically altogether, which I guess takes us to the second question you asked, which was there a point in my career when my resilience was tested? Is that
Yeah.
there were probably obviously several points, and maybe we can go through some of them through this. But the one that first comes to mind um, is by a weird coincidence of events, I ended up having to be a kind of lead in putting together a massive international conference in Madrid, where I was living and working. But it was a multi-dimensional, multi-party on the Middle East
Yeah.
and involved, I don't know, maybe 40 countries, civil society and officials. They all had to have their say. They all had to feel included, and the issues, as always in the Middle East, are incredibly complex. And
Yeah.
so I think I ended up having to lead this process. I had huge help. Certainly wasn't alone, but for reasons that probably aren't worth going into, I was the tip of the spear.
Okay.
Therefore, the resilience had to be through the roof because I had demands coming at me from every corner
Yeah.
in the prep and during the meeting, both.
Okay.
And then, so just the nature of the complexity and the nature of it. And in the end, it came down to three people, including myself, who had to basically decide everything.
Yeah.
And on top of that, as you can imagine, and this happens in all walks of life, things go wrong during the event. And then you have to have sudden problem solving.
Yeah.
And that makes me think about other such circumstances where my resilience is really tested. And so, yeah, again, when I was a Canadian diplomat in Cairo, we had to suddenly, in 48 hours, get the Egyptians decided to host a summit on counterterrorism, and our prime minister had to come in, and we had to many countries, put together a summit in 48 hours. That really tests those kinds of things where the complexity levels through the roof
Yes.
and the stakes are high, meaning if things go wrong, it's visible and public.
Yeah.
Can really test your resilience because you feel like part of you feels like you're going to fall apart, and
Yeah.
you don't, and I suppose that is resilience. And
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, what would you say I guess from your perspective, the key resilience skills in the diplomatic world? What would you?
mm, I think there are three. I just three, and they lead to one. So the
Okay.
three are I just mentioned one, which is is this a resilience skill? You have to know how to manage complexity.
Yeah.
If you can't manage complexity, you might fall apart. So you have to kind of, yeah, you have to be able to learn to deal with many levels at once, from the personal to the political to the logistical,
Yes.
and a lot more cultural. And all of that is one weave, and you're trying to, and it's managing complexity has to do with what our common friend Ian McGilchrist is about, which is an ability to see the whole first rather than seeing all the parts.
Yeah.
And so if you're coming at things from a very left brain view of wanting to solve particulars, it could be a problem. So
Yeah.
that's one, is managing complexity. The other is an extremely high degree of adaptability, probably more than what most people have to face in their lives. And that's because of the nature of any diplomatic task, which is you're dealing with a group that's not your own. And whether you're a diplomat where you're representing a certain agenda, your own countries,
Yeah.
or whether you're a mediator, in which case you're not representing but trying to get something done, you're faced with outlooks, attitudes towards politics, towards life that may be radically different than yours, and so you've got to be quite adaptable to that outlook in order to manage it towards some constructive end, hopefully not destructive end. So the second is adaptability, and the third, I think, would be this is tough actually. I've felt this many times. I think all diplomats have to learn to withhold the personal opinions. Uh, you can't. It's not about your personal opinion. Whether you're a diplomat representing a state, then it's definitely not your personal opinion. And this is a problem for many people, and they
Yeah.
some quit. And or whether you're a mediator, and again, it's not about your personal opinion. You can weave it in, but you really have to put your own, even sometimes, I don't want to say values because that's probably going too far, opinions in check in order A, to see clearly, and B, not to interfere with processes beyond your personal opinion.
Yeah.
And that does take a certain resilience because all humans have an instinct to just want to express themselves and have their own view on the table. Well,
Yeah.
that's a kind of very subtle but consistent resilience quality. Those are the three I think that come to mind.
Yeah.
There's one other which is I think wraps them all. It's a sense of judgment, but maybe we can get into that a bit later. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's it's interesting because I think no matter what you do in life, these skills or attributes or resources or whatever you want to define them are uh, they're essential in every walk of life. I think, really, aren't they?
I would think so. Um, yeah, probably the third, this business of withholding your opinion,
Yeah.
which can be quite difficult sometimes, by the way, as a diplomat, because you might feel very strongly about something. You might be seeing victims and you're very unhappy about it. Um, Probably the third is the one we all have to manage complexity in any life. And okay, there are higher levels, but um, yeah, and yes to adaptability. Um, so for sure, the holding of personal opinion is something, though, I've noticed is done less now. People seem to wallow in their viewpoints, even though, okay, as a diplomat, it's an imperative. There's no choice.
Yeah.
Being a diplomat is not about giving a personal opinion. Being a citizen is, but I wonder whether sometimes people shouldn't take a few steps back before expressing their opinions because, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
So yes,
Yeah.
that's but
There's an increasing volume of shooting from the hip,
correct,
um, which is not
and
helpful.
in a very loud manner.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's more often than not very well thought through.
No, I agree with you. I mean, just as an example, when I hear people, and this is during the last year and a half of the Gaza war,
Mm.
people have had extremely intense opinions,
Yes.
which I understood from many angles, but I understood the opinion and I felt it, but they lost the big picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crikey. It's certainly polarized the world, I think.
Yes, and but I think we've had a run now since maybe before, but especially since COVID,
Mm.
of crises that polarized the world.
Yeah.
You know, COVID, Gaza, Ukraine to some degree, although it was more
Yeah.
limited, maybe not quite global. Um, and Trump
Yes.
and climate change also polarizes people. So
Yeah.
yeah, we've seemed to become specialists in polarization, unfortunately. And diplomacy is not about that. And again, back to the resilience
Mm.
point, it takes a bit of strength and resilience to withhold your own view in order to permit others' views and get a richer band of discussion going. It's as straightforward as that.
Yeah, it is. And I've fallen foul of this in my life. It took me a long time to learn to open up and to want to open up, to learn from other people's perspectives.
Yeah,
And it was a hard. I found that quite challenging.
yeah. It is challenging. And as I said, I mean, there have been moments in my mediation career where I wanted to say something quite intense because I was disagreeing vehemently with what I was hearing.
Yeah,
I do have strong opinions about matters that I'm working on,
yeah, of course.
but always I would ask myself, is this going to help?
Yeah,
I would literally ask myself that. And
yeah,
so I suppose all that is somewhat related to resilience. I don't know. Is it? Is it? Do you
yeah.
think?
I absolutely, because I mean, as you know, my work is about kind of emotional and psychological resilience, and how the emotional resilience comes first in order to develop the psychological resilience. And that emotional piece is the key to all of this,
Interesting.
because without people expressing their opinions and their biases and etc., very emotionally, they are, as you said from Ian McGilchrist's work, it's very left brain,
Yeah.
very left hemisphere, whereas not seeing the bigger picture from the right hemisphere. It's stuck in the fractured detail,
Yeah.
and not seeing the big picture
That's
and
exactly right. Yeah.
the impact of what they're saying and doing.
Well, we all get caught up with emotions.
We
So
certainly do.
it's very human.
It is. It's one of the joys of being human.
Yeah, exactly. So
And it was a very large penny with a loud thud when it dropped for me when I learned about um, the only time people are really truly honest is their initial emotional response to someone or something, because you can't hide it. It's there.
good point.
Um,
Yeah.
but as human beings, we have this wonderful capability to put brakes on it and go, well, actually, yeah, I'm justified feeling that way, but I don't have to go from flash to bang. I can step things up as I need to.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, well, you know, at my organization, the Conciliators Guild, we put a lot of emphasis on the role of emotions in politics.
Hmm.
And I often think about the analogy you just used, which is um, it's like driving a car, like literally like driving a car. And
Yeah.
we don't know that there's a steering wheel, that we go right and left with our emotions. And I don't mean just ideologically so. Or when do you press the accelerator, more emotion, or the brake? But it, these days, it's almost as if the steering wheel only goes in one direction and only the accelerator is on.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that a lot.
So, and I suppose the resilience is the ability not to let that happen, that strength of character to, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think that.
flexibility of mind as well, which is slightly different than resilience. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But it is a key piece of the puzzle, the resilience puzzle, as you said, adaptability, absolutely, um, and flexibility of mind. If you can be a bit of a behavioral chameleon and adapt to other people and absorb their perspective and see
Yeah.
it from their, from through their eyes and feel it through their body, you get a better sense and you get greater clarity of what's going on, and it helps. I have found this, and it's bloody hard to do sometimes.
Yes, it is. I mean, behavioral chameleon, that almost defines diplomats, but
Yeah,
um, that has a downside too, because you can lose yourself too, huh? I mean,
yeah,
we all have a certain personality and character, and I've had that too. I've gotten to, even recently, I've had stages where I get fed up of being a diplomat, of being the fellow who sees the other's views well, and because there are also circumstances, and I think this is important actually, that in international relations and diplomacy, where actually diplomacy isn't the answer, and you need, I hate to say this, but it's the truth, where you need more coercive means.
yeah,
Um, yeah, so and there's a religion around mediation and diplomacy which doesn't permit that, by the way. I'm not part of that, but some people think never should you use force. But I think it should be a very small number of cases, not rule. But diplomacy that is not. So there are moments in one's life where, if you can afford it, depending on what you're doing, you can say. What I do is I say no to doing something. So if my resilience is being so tested that my own integrity is at stake about an issue,
yeah, yeah,
my answer is not to do it. I just won't do that demand. I just won't do it.
yeah, yeah. It is interesting because it comes down to individual core values, uh, and
Yep.
when we don't, it doesn't feel good when they're tested and challenged and pulled.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's decidedly uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, it's also circumstantial. I think in some cases you have to do it, and others you
Yes.
can pull out and say no.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
fast rule. It's depends on the context actually. So
yeah, very much. Yeah, yeah. Context is extremely important, and I guess knowing what your values are,
that's right.
and not many people do.
No, it's true as well. It's also, I think, sometimes not even value. It could be just a certain perception of reality, meaning I see this reality in this way. I've thought about it enough and tested it enough to feel that it's a solid perception.
Yeah,
And if what I'm doing is counter to that, that isn't just a value judgment, although there's a value dimension. It's actually a perception problem.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So, so resilience is everywhere.
Yes, yeah, and crikey, increasingly being tested, very much so. We've talked about, outside of this, and you mentioned it early on about, kind of phases through of civilization and human society. Um, and we talk about the fourth turning, and Ian McGilchrist's, the rise and fall of civilizations and how that all ties in. And it seems to me that there comes a point where human resilience in cycles dwindles,
Hmm.
which seems to lead to more conflict because everybody seems to be more emotionally driven, more conflict, less collaboration, lack of interest in negotiating, and it becomes more blunt force.
I think that's exactly right. And I would even put it in slightly different language, but I think it's exactly right, which is, and it seems to be some kind of almost natural cycle. I don't know if we can get around it, but we go soft
Yeah,
when cultures and civilizations are building themselves up. They're very resilient and very ready to meet challenge, and they do damage. There's no doubt about it. But they're hardy. And then after the peak, when they've succeeded, it's almost like a law of life. And prosperity does this, and success does this. They go soft, and then they enjoy the fruits of their labors and lose resilience. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think the big question to me in that regard, because I think we're living it, that's why I'm asking it. I think
Yeah.
we're living it in the UK, in the United States, in the West, is when you are in the decline phase. And I think there are, one can argue about it, but I think there's good evidence that these societies are in the decline phase. Um, you mentioned some of the symptoms of that already.
Yeah.
Then the question to me is, especially for leaders, is how do you handle that?
Yeah.
How do you, with some resilience, but probably with some other qualities, um, make America great again? And I'm not saying yes or no to Trump's agenda, by the way. It's just that phrase suggests an attempt to break that cycle. We're not going to decline. We're going to go up again.
Yes.
And it's not impossible. I'm asking the question. He may succeed, he may not. We'll find out. The bigger question to me is, how do you handle a decline? I'm not sure we have any clue about that, because no, just like any human being, an individual doesn't like to feel decline with age, as I'm beginning to feel. Nobody likes it. But then you learn to handle it once you get over the dislike. You learn tricks and adaptations. It's
Yes.
societies need to do the same, but that is not in our political playbook.
I don't think it's in the human playbook. We seem to be historically very poor at
Yeah.
taking a different path.
Well, I think when we are in decline, we either go into denial,
Yeah.
or we hide, and part of that is hiding in comforts, or we try to become great again. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's difficult. So, I mean, to give it a bottom line, for Trump to succeed in what he's trying to do, he needs the American people to step up and create new businesses and meet challenges domestically.
Yeah.
If they don't do that, he's going to lose his agenda. If you
Yes.
see what I mean, like, and
Yeah.
if they don't do that because the whole society is in a kind of decline state, people just want to take it easy and argue, like you said, um, rather than do things, difficult.
Yes. Yeah. And that there's an old quote that has sprung to mind. It's no, I'm going to get this in the right order. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times.
Sums it up perfectly. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful quote. I don't remember who said it, but it's
No,
brilliant. And maybe it's yours. And
no, it's definitely not mine.
no, it could be. Um, it's exactly right. And it's a cycle, and it's like the seasons. I'm staring out the window and looking how beautiful Oxfordshire is at this moment.
Yeah.
2 months ago it was winter, so it's a cycle.
Yeah. It is. And is there anything we can do about it? I probably, but we just don't know quite how or when because to have that level of that level of awareness at that level,
That's right. See, I
that's
think it's leaders' job. That's part of their job. They have many jobs, but
yes.
the quality. I was discussing this with somebody yesterday who's very senior in diplomacy in Europe. He's really concerned about the quality of leadership in our era. And I think the leaders we have around the world are terrible, actually. So they're certainly not fitting to the demands of the time.
No, I am inclined to agree with that.
So I guess there's a lot of learning there. I certainly don't have those answers, but I think it's really worth investigating. How should people manage civilizational or cultural decline with intelligence? It doesn't have to be like, oh my God, we're declining, it's all over. No, no, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about understanding that it's nature's way of handing off to another group, or etc. And
Yeah. Is there any sort of, well, this is a loaded question because I am slightly rhetorical between you and I. With this kind of resilience piece, and is that there's nothing you've mentioned before to me, there's nothing specific within resilience itself that is taught within the diplomatic world.
no,
It's kind of, it draws people to it that are more naturally resilient.
exactly.
Um, but there's nothing,
Or yes, that's correct. Yeah.
and it's something that develops with age and life experience, very much so. If people are open to it.
Yeah.
But do you think there's something that could be done? And this is where I'm just obviously saying between you and I question, because I know what the guild is doing.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I think it's a great question actually, because well, first just to confirm, it's not taught.
Yeah,
Maybe they teach it a bit more now, but I don't think so, because I'm a bit exposed to some of these foreign service institutes. Um, no, they're not taught about personal resilience. No. Um, but like you said, the people drawn are of a certain kind. Now, I should say, though, that I have seen in many cases people very unhappy as diplomats across the world because they're a fish out of water. They're not in their own environment, and they may be fascinated by the foreign culture, but they're still a fish out of water even then.
yeah,
And they might be bureaucratically frustrated by the bureaucracy they're in. So there are a lot of frustrations and loneliness. You're not in your own world. You're not with your tribe. So um, some people fall apart without showing it. Illness, alcoholism, a million other
yeah,
uh, very tragic symptoms. So I should say that does happen. It's not like it doesn't. It's um, and probably those people. I'm not sure if resilience training would have helped them from the start. It might have. Those people who kind of fall through the cracks, that might
yeah,
have. It might have, because they don't know. For example, they're not taught about maintaining a healthy personal social life and personal life, a working life in their own sphere in order to attend to all their professional demands. They're not even taught that. That's something we just assume. But then to answer your question a bit more, um, yes, the Conciliators Guild, which I'm very happy to say you're part of, um, we really want to get certain ideas out that are so basic but so important, that are baselines. And uh, I think they should be part of a diplomat's training. They should be part of any bureaucrat's training. Even after the discussion I had yesterday with this senior diplomat, maybe this should somehow, this is the hardest bit, get to leaders, which because they're the ones who are in the end making decisions.
yes,
And those ideas revolve around two main things that are related to resilience. They are, first, to really deeply understand and absorb our strongest inner motivators. So we're all, you know, walking around the planet doing things, and we don't really know exactly why we're doing them. And we can identify what those motivators are. What motivates you to do X, Y, and Z?
hmm,
And there's a list, which is, I think, fairly comprehensive. We call them innate needs.
yep,
And then we can look at those and see, well, am I doing this for attention, for status, for achievement? What is my purpose here? And or am I lacking a sense of belonging? It's you can do an audit on yourself with those, on both on yourself and then also on how you're on your work. So I do that when dealing with conflicted parties, as to, well, what are they actually looking for here? Their stated interest may not always be what they're actually looking for. So this helps bridge between what's being stated and expressed and the deeper need.
yeah,
The other pack of or baseline info, and resilience is really important here, is groupthink. And we are a herd-like animal. Even if we don't run around on four legs, we're still herd-like,
Yeah.
and we fall into group behavior mode in an instant, and we're completely unaware of it. And then, I guess to go with the analogy, the blinders go up, and that's it. Now,
Yes.
so yes, we at the Conciliars Guild really think these basics have to be taught, have to be understood, have to be absorbed. Otherwise, we're all walking blind about our own software.
Yes.
Um, and I think you're right. Also, in your emphasis, I mean, you understand what we're doing, and I think your emphasis on resilience is core to all that. Because so, the question I would have would be, well, how do you have the resilience to not fall in the groupthink? What are the components of that resilience? And we could look at that, and I think that's an important question as one example.
Yeah, crikey. I mean, it's an enormous task. But again, it's like, chunking it down into bite-sized pieces. And
That's it.
I think
Exactly right. Exactly right.
I am a firm believer that it starts at the individual level.
Yes.
And the more people that are personally resilient, the more resilient society is.
I totally agree, and that's the bottom line. And the quality of individuals who understand these things is really important because they're going to carry these ideas around.
Yeah.
Um, but I would add something here, which is that these motivators and groupthink, we're human beings, and so we're so used to behaving a certain way. They're literally like the skin on our face, so we can't really see it. We're just doing it, and
Yeah.
so part of our purpose, or anybody who's interested in these matters, is to give a kind of a sideways reflection for people to look and go, oh, this is what I'm doing. So a mirror
Yes.
where these needs are identified, where certain markers of groupthink are identified, where qualities that lead to resilience or not are activated or not.
Yes.
So that learning is the key, is to have those in you. I mean, I had to learn them. I have had significant emotional weaknesses and vulnerabilities, and I'm still learning about hidden ones that are still motivating in the wrong directions. Or so, yeah. So the thing that most I find the most difficult bit is it all requires some effort, and most people don't want to make any effort.
Yes. And the hard part is when you get caught off guard and then having to consciously remember to do it if it's not ingrained.
That's right. But that's a learning moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And it takes that conscious, consistent effort of practice to get it, to make it second nature and habitual.
Absolutely. Although I would really say that if you have what you're saying, so if you have that sense that I'm really going to learn, you have to have that.
Yes.
Then these off guard moments are probably the most precious because you're startled.
Yeah.
And once you're startled, you're actually more open.
Hmm.
And once you're more open, you're more likely to learn. But you have to add what you said, which is you have to then really learn it rather than just note it and disappear.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think life does give us off guard moments in order to learn.
Certainly. Yeah. Or it's certainly it's extremely accomplished at those off guard moments.
Exactly. Yeah, a few too many, and
Sometimes, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Sometimes you
yeah,
just need to take a breather every now and again.
yeah, yeah, for sure, definitely.
So many things spinning through my head right now.
Sorry to have done that.
No, it's good. It's it's a very thought-provoking conversation. Precisely why I've been looking forward to this so much. Um,
Well, it's a pleasure speaking with you, Simon. I'm
it,
even making a note to myself as well about something I'd like to develop out of our conversation. There you go.
there we go. Excellent. Win-win.
It is, absolutely.
Um, you mentioned about, there are people who fall through the cracks in the diplomatic world,
Yeah.
um, and that emotional imbalance for them in terms of the emotional resilience
Yeah.
leads to physical and psychological symptoms.
Yes.
People we don't like to show weakness or that we're failing, which is
Correct.
people will do all sorts of things, drink, drugs,
Yep.
gambling, whatever, to
Totally.
um, I'm, I don't know how much of that goes on in that you've personally seen, and is that something that you think should be dealt with to help more
Yeah.
to have that kind of that safety net in between the cracks?
So first, it does exist, and we'll come back to it in a sec. And I've seen it. The second is, as in all walks of life, there's a spectrum here, and some people are actually really solid. So it's not like,
Yeah,
all diplomats are drunkards.
yeah. Not
Um,
at all, no.
yeah, although there are a lot of cocktail parties and stuff, but which are extremely annoying, by the way. And never mind. So there are people who have really healthy lives, and so
Yeah,
and then, but I would guess I've never done any statistical analysis here, but just from my own anecdotal experience, that I would guess there's probably a higher proportion of people in diplomacy and in even in international relations writ more largely, because diplomacy is only one component. There are people
yeah,
working in humanitarian NGOs, there are people working in development, there are people working in conflict resolution, as I do. So there's a
yes,
whole range of stuff. Um, that there, you see, international life comes with a blessing and a curse. The blessing is it's highly stimulating,
yeah,
and the other blessing for some people is you're not at home. If you hate your home, that's a great blessing.
yeah, yes,
The downside is it's highly stimulating and you're not at home. So the what happens to those who fall through the cracks, at least that I can perceive and remember, is even though they might be highly stimulated by being in a war zone, um, they're either lonely. Many people are very lonely because they're out of their own culture.
yeah,
So, and let's say they're not great at making friends because some people are better at socializing than others. Then they're very vulnerable because to go back to the guild stuff and human givens, their needs aren't being met, and then resilience really becomes critical.
yeah,
If you are not resilient there, you will probably take up some bad habits. I think it's almost again a law of life.
yeah.
Now, and then to answer your question, yeah, actually, you're giving me a new thought. Look, I haven't studied this, so I can't say firmly, but I think this stuff is not taught.
Yeah.
Um, and therefore, Simon, maybe you need to teach it. So, well, I actually think you're hitting on something. I'll even ask around, at least at the Canadian service, which I know very well.
Yeah.
Do you teach people to handle their personal lives well while they're abroad? That's a resilience question. It's a human needs question. I don't know. I don't think they do it. What they have done, which is good, and I've seen this progression, they're much more clever bureaucracies at Western bureaucracies at permitting couples, for example, to be together on postings, and
Yeah.
they've learned that, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
because they're helping people's individual or couple cohesion be maintained.
Yeah.
So that helps. And I think the bureaucracies have done that. The rest, I think there's more learning to come.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, these are, um, they're tough jobs.
Very. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They're not as tough as what some other people do. I mean, let's not all, they're not firefighters. I mean, there are, I mean, I was a kind of firefighter in a way because I had to go and when I was at the United Nations, I actually had to literally go and deal with the Lebanese-Israeli border. I mean, on the ground, not just conceptually.
Yeah.
And that was both highly amusing and, and very difficult.
I
So
can
they
imagine.
can be very tough jobs because you have people in conflict facing each other wanting to shoot each other and you're trying to figure out a way to stop them from doing that. So, um, and it can be humorous, by the way. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but they're also highly stimulating jobs, which can cut both ways. So I have a suggestion to you, to anybody really, and that is that highly stimulating jobs can also diminish our resilience. This almost counterintuitive, but I think they can because it means the person is so drawn to certain stimulants from the job that they forget about everything else,
Hmm.
and then they actually weaken.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They're out of balance. It's happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Yeah. Absolutely spot on. It's it becomes addictive.
Yes, and the thrill.
It is. Well, yeah. Nothing like
And
a.
then you lose sight of the other things that matter, and then all of a sudden you're psychologically and physically falling apart.
Yes. Yeah. You're single when you didn't want to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, definitely. I mean, I've seen that and lived it, and that's a concern in diplomatic life for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't for a moment but think that it's an easy job by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it's not. It's just very stimulating and quite challenging. So if you're up to it in a way, it's great.
Yes. Yeah. It's great until it's not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly what we're saying. There's a downside, and
Yeah.
not. Yeah. If you don't act early enough, pay a price.
Yeah. And it's that it comes down to that personal awareness, or as you mentioned, also having good leadership because somebody else might see it in you before you do.
Yes, I mean, I hate to say this, but foreign services are not known for good leadership because good leadership is almost by definition good policy making.
Yeah.
And that very often good policymakers are not good managers. Very often. It's rare that you get somebody with that double skill set. They're really good at developing policy for their leaders
Yeah.
and they know how to manage the institution.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we've covered a lot of ground, Simon.
My word, haven't we just? It's funny because in your book, which I will this one
Thank you.
get it. It's a fascinating read. Um, you talk about inner change and personal transformation.
Yeah.
How does that piece fit within the role as a diplomat?
Um, well, I mean, the answer to that is fairly straightforward, and at least, and I'd love to know what you think. So that fits in my life. So I'm sort of, I suppose, kind of made to be a diplomat, maybe, and therefore that's what I did, and therefore that's my path. And within that path, if I'm half intelligent, I'm really not sure, by the way, then I learn to change. What does that mean? I use the opportunity of the path that I'm on, which in my case was diplomacy,
Yeah.
to to learn, and the learning process changes my inner self to some degree. I don't, I think there are certain um, personal qualities that never change because they're just who you are. Now, I think that path can be anything. So it's my path to be a diplomat, a mediator.
Hmm.
Um, Honestly, if you're aware and if you're on the right path, you could be a mechanic.
Yeah.
On really, I mean, I don't think what matters is one of two things. Is are you being like is the path you're on something that really suits you? That's one important. Um, but the other thing aspect is equally important. Not everybody has a choice, and therefore the other road to inner development is to accept what comes. So it's this blend between trying to find meaning and new learning constantly in life. At the same time, we don't get all our wishes, and life can be very difficult. And therefore, the other inner transformation path is actually, and this is resilience. Resilience is a huge part of this. Actually, is to kind of accept some pretty negative situations and find the qualities of character in that situation, like patience
Yeah.
or uh, being able to deflect and do something else on the side that permit you to survive a patch that's not easy and certainly not fitting. So it's not, I don't think there's anything, well, you were asking something different, and then I'll say this and turn it back over to you. Diplomacy does one thing more than maybe other paths,
Yeah.
which forces it, which is to two things really. One is it forces you to be adaptable, because if you're
Yes.
not, you just won't be a good diplomat. And the second, which I haven't stressed enough, is it, and here I'm smiling because I'm not sure it, this happens, but it forces better judgment. See, you're
Okay.
constantly put up, there are situations put in front of you where you have to make a call, and you learn pretty quickly about from your wrong calls, you
Yeah.
know. So, um, th- judgment and adaptability are pretty core to inner change.
Hmm.
And so diplomacy does probably give those more than other paths.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you clearly rose to the top of this because you're still here.
Yeah. uh, I wonder if yeah, I'm not sure I think of it that way, but yes, I'm still here. I still do it. I'm much pickier than I ever was in what I do and more focused. Um, I think there's another game now as well because the world's turned upside down, and maybe as it should be, by the way. Maybe people won't like that, but I'm not sure the world was going the right way. So it's upside down,
Yeah.
and therefore I'm interested in something else than just doing diplomacy now, which is okay, if it's upside down, what's another way for us to be right side up in a better way?
Yes.
And I'm very interested in this politically, even if it's for the long-term future. Even if it's for 100 years from now, I think I'd really now like to put pen to paper and work with people like you and many others to delineate what some of the basics are of a much healthier political and diplomatic scene. I think we're lost at sea at the moment.
Yeah. I think humanity has got itself a little bit confused and tied in knots. The good thing about things getting turned upside down is that things that were once hidden come out into the daylight.
I very much agree with you. And again, we're coming back to resilience. I hope people don't panic because panic is the opposite of resilience. And I noticed a lot of panic. I mean, just by the way, it's a living thing, even over Trump. So
Yeah.
most people I know have gone nuts over Trump. I mean, nuts in a negative way. There's a lot of what Trump does I don't like. There's a lot of what Trump is I don't like, but not everything Trump is doing is wrong.
No.
And even beyond all of that, I don't think panicking will help anybody in this new world.
Yeah.
And this kind of highly emotional reaction to Trump, I'm not sure it's going to help.
No. No, it doesn't. You see these spikes in the financial markets in particular, don't you? The knee-jerk reactions to things, and it all settles and balances back out again.
Yes, but I think it's a good analogy because it's a bit also over the top. Like
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
you can react, but again, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation. Not to that degree, and people just seem to go over the top on everything these days.
Yes. So just pause. Give it a minute.
Yeah, I've written an article about this. I want to see if I can publish it. It's called The Inflamed Mind,
Ooh.
because everybody's got a very inflamed mind, and I'm looking at them like, okay, yes, I agree, there's some negatives, but I mean, there are a lot of negatives, but your inflammation isn't going to help resolve these problems. In fact, I think you're just adding to the general inflammation of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. My God. Yes, it does. It needs, yeah, some global ibuprofen.
I think that's called Netflix.
So just to change things a little bit, having described all that, which has been fascinating, thank you.
Pleasure.
If you would,
Thank you.
looking back at your younger self as you started out on your diplomatic career and knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, that's a hell of a question. Myself.
Yeah,
It's much harder giving myself advice than others, isn't it?
yeah.
Um, ooh. I don't think I would give any because I think it went as it should have gone. Um, I think I'm glad I became a diplomat.
Hmm.
I'm glad I went to the postings that I went to. So, and I'm actually even, this maybe cuts to the heart of it. I'm even glad that I went through the learning processes that I went through, um, which were sometimes difficult.
Yeah.
So, um, so would I have gained? Yes, I'll tell you, it's this is not marketing. Um, would I have gained by courses at the beginning of my diplomatic career
Mm,
that were not about protocol, but about humanity,
yeah.
whether psychology, history? I think yes, because for one simple reason. Um, I mean, I was interested in that stuff anyway. So in a way, like, and as many people are, so I just did my own homework, right? But if we did that institutionally, um, it would have rooted my work in a bigger picture, in a context, in an internal context, psychology, in an external context, history, culture. That would have helped because also I and my colleagues and the institution would have kind of also gotten on the same page. So it's not so much about, for in my case, by the way, and this is my case. You asked about me because there are others I can think of who needed the resilience stuff you're talking about
Yeah.
because they fell apart in certain ways, you see. So in my case, I didn't have that problem, but I had others. So I think that would have been helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. More contextual learning right from the start.
Yeah.
They don't think like that in those institutions, unfortunately.
Not yet.
That's exactly right. I think they should. I think they because you see when you're a diplomat and a bureaucrat, because bureaucrats are just actually diplomats who are on the front line internationally. They're not much more than that. You lose sight of the bigger picture.
Hmm.
Yeah. Unless you make an effort, you lose sight. And of the inner picture, of your own, as we already discussed, you
Yes.
overstimulated, you'll lose sight of how your own life has gone out of balance.
Yeah. Lose your own values and need, or sight of your own values and needs, and
Yeah.
wonder why life feels rather odd.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. I think my errors weren't in my work, you see. I think my errors were more in personal life, I think, which partly related to my work. There, I would have given myself a load of advice, by the way, just to make sure you know that I'm aware of my failings. Not so much on my diplomatic course. It's what it had to be, and but on the personal side, which was linked to it, definitely I would have given myself some advice.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Um, you touched on something there that stirred something in my mind, is the kind of the cross-cultural piece. You've obviously had to work through a variety of different cultures. Were there any, in term, sticking to my theme, are there any common resilience threads across cultures that you
Oh,
could
that's a great question.
gave you kind of a wedge to kind of be able to kind of get for a chink in the armor to open things up?
Oh, I see. You mean in the professional craft?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. I think this is a good question, but let me answer it in several ways, if you don't mind. And some of it's not exactly what you're asking, but
No. 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 Go for it.
first, I noticed, and this is important, that a lot of I worked in the Middle East, so that's my main area. So um, the cultures there are, despite the horrors that they live, by the way,
Yeah.
are highly resilient, mainly because of their sense of collective. They still have very strong in-group cultures
Yeah.
and familial bonds and tribal bonds, and that actually really provides them with an enormous degree of resilience. And this is not just conceptual. What I mean is they're living every day, every moment connected to other people, family, community, nation.
Yeah.
Of course, there are a lot of frictions and problems and differences, but all families have that. So I saw an enormous amount of resilience amongst Lebanese, Palestinians, Syrians, Israelis, everybody from that.
Yeah.
So that's is an important thing to just mention. That's a cultural thing. In the West, we have that in varying degrees, depending on country, but it's
Yes.
less. We're so individual oriented.
Yeah.
We forget about the embedding of the individual. Even the term embedding is completely wrong. About the presence of the individual in a larger relationship field. We've gone probably, this is well known, we're a bit out of whack on that. But that's a whole other subject. And I think that diminishes resilience in the West, by the way, of individuals. So that's one thing,
Yeah.
right? But about the actual craft, yes, there's one quality that cuts through culture the most easily, and that's humor.
Yeah.
So and yeah, so humor, number one, is it's amazing how you can actually make people laugh across cultures. Yes, there are differences between British humor and French humor, but humor is human, and when you humor is flipping the perspective on something into a kind of slightly startling, and we find it funny.
Yes.
Um, that helps enormously in cross-cultural management. Is humor
Yeah.
and keeping a light touch. Being heavy is a disaster.
Yeah.
It really destroys everything, actually. So not too light. There's always something to be done, right? So you have to. There's still some goal you're trying to get to. So you can't just joke around all day and eat pizza or something, but keeping it relatively light with a degree of humor and the other aspect related to that. And this is I don't this is worth talking about, and maybe not. It's a degree of just humanity, and I hesitate to use that word because it can mean anything to anybody.
Yeah.
But I think people can tell if you're well-meaning or not, no matter their culture.
Yes.
I don't know whether you said maybe you found the same thing.
Absolutely. Yes.
You know, if you're fairly sincere, you don't have a huge agenda. They smell it. They can tell, and then that's huge because that's the beginning of trust. Maybe
Yes.
not full trust because you may have conflicting agendas, but so just be a human being rather than a category.
Yeah.
Those are probably the most important qualities, to be honest with you. And then, okay, then more technically, um, this is something that only comes with experience. If you're actually mediating or trying to get different people to a certain position, you have to have a very profound sense of rhythm, of human interaction, of dynamics. You have to feel these things. It's almost like an artist. And then you have to not just, it's not technical. And then you have to intervene or not at the right moment.
Yeah.
And all that takes a certain, I don't know if it's resilience, but it takes a certain uh, part of you has to be observing, which I suppose does take resilience. You can't be completely immersed in the thing.
No.
You have to be
Yeah.
slightly on the observing side.
Yes. Yeah. Because you need that awareness of
Yeah,
how this conversation is changing.
exactly. And
Yeah.
when to stop it, when to add a joke, when to take a break, when to say, okay, we're going to pocket these gains now and move on to another subject. So it's that's
Yeah.
a craft.
Yes.
Did I answer your question? Maybe
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. There's a definite element of finesse.
Yes, yes, yes. But and that comes only through experience, I find. You
Yeah.
can't just teach that to somebody in a course and launch them. It's not, it's
No, I think would imagine it'd be somewhat clunky initially. Like,
yeah, and it'll look like you're trying to do it, which is a disaster.
yeah,
But practice, I think, yeah, practice does it.
yeah, yeah. So I've only got a couple of things that I want to ask about now. One is about the guild. I'd like you to explain to people what the guild is, what it's about, how it came about, what
Sure.
what the aim is.
Well, I'll keep it short for time's sake. The guild came about through my own learning in the Middle East. You asked me about that earlier. So I could see, right, the these intractable conflicts over there, that we weren't managing them right.
Yeah,
And I could see that we weren't seeing into them right, that there were much bigger issues at play than what we were attending to. No wonder it didn't work. We just weren't addressing the actual problems.
yeah,
Then, by a coincidence of history, of life, I got to know Ivan Tyrrell, and at the time also Joe Griffin, who founded Human Givens, and which is a paradigm of well-being. They do psychotherapy in the UK. I don't do that, but their outlining of the hidden motives was really useful to me because it clarified to me what's actually going on in the Middle East. And so I kind of had a sense from my own experience, but they crystallized it.
yeah,
So the guild was a marriage between this experience I had as a diplomat and this knowledge that Ivan and Joe have brought forward to the UK, um, which is universal. It's not just about their stuff. It's
yeah,
universal. I think it's universal. We could discuss that, but so the guild is about bringing those things together, plus other things such as I mentioned, our habit for groupthink, and in getting those ideas out into the political sphere as much as possible in both knowledge and practice in order that human beings develop new political habits. This is done through communications. You have a book there, so we're doing it right now, you and I, right? So
Yes.
um, through articles and through courses, which we want to do a lot more of.
Yeah.
It's also done, and again, this is just building, done through a network. So you're part of that network. Right now, it's a small network, but we really want to grow over the next 2 years, 3, 4 years. We want a global network of individuals who like these ideas, think they're valuable, and are putting them into practice.
Yeah.
And again, I would stress that the quality of those individuals is really key because they 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 will bring to us also new ideas, as you do, by the way, in the resilience package, which is related but a bit different. So
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing that is also really helpful, is for people to come with their own, and new amalgams can be formed. So that's what the guild does, and I would just stress one thing, which is this is long term, okay? But I really believe this. We're in a very strange situation right now where people are really looking at AI
Yep.
as a fix-it for many things, or as a tool for very dangerous things like even warfare, or they're reverting to tribalism, let's call it nationalism,
Yep.
or they're fixated on a kind of technocratic answer to global problems like climate change. We all get together and um, have international bodies that regulate things, and my strong view is none of that's going to work. In fact, I think it's a perfect storm. Not just it's not going to work. I think actually we don't know what we're doing. This is a whole other podcast, but we
Yeah.
don't know what we're doing. So very simply, it's time to introduce the ideas the guild proposes, because they're about us. They're about human beings. And as you said earlier, the change begins with us. And I
Yeah.
think we're there. I think human beings are at a stage of evolution where that notion, which has been around from day zero, has to become much more prevalent and important. And I cannot tell you what exact forms and structures that will take. I actually have no idea. No, I have my own notions. I do, regionalization, decentralization. I have my own, but that's not what the guild's about. The guild's about the core knowledge, not about the structures.
Yeah.
We're upstream. The downstream life will sort out.
Yes. Yeah. Brilliant. Within this, within the notes, I'll have linked to the guild and people, etc. So
Thank you.
people can check out the website, which I
Great.
uh, highly recommend people do. And the last parting shot. What advice? What would be your one piece of advice about uh, for people to cultivate their own resilience in high stakes, high stress environments? What would it be?
Hmm. It's kind of like what we just said. Learn about yourself. Most people don't learn about themselves. Well, they actually, sorry, that's not fair. They do. They do. Everybody has, reflects about themselves, learns, oh, I've done this 5 times, it doesn't work. So maybe just to accelerate, if you're in a high stress environment, I think unless you're a genius, and even a genius will fail at a certain point, they usually flash out at a certain point. Um, it's really important to gather knowledge about how you're working, who you are, what needs are being met and not being met. It's what you call resilience. At the same time, There's no way around just diving in and doing it and learning by error.
Yeah.
Both. Most of us, including me, hesitate, right? I do.
I do
I've
more
done
so.
enough. I've jumped in enough, but I often have hesitated.
Yeah.
Fear of failure, fear of harm. Okay, you shouldn't be a lunatic, but you should go in.
Yeah.
So that would be my main advice. And I guess the other part, which maybe only comes with old age, but is enjoy the trip.
Yeah.
We sometimes forget that. An old adage, but not
Yeah.
wrong.
No, no, it's so bloody true. We can get so immersed in doing things we don't live it enough.
Yeah, I mean the wonders are all around us all the time.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I lived in Jerusalem for 3 years, and I was on a high there. That was one of those environments that was overstimulating. It's actually almost evil. I hate to say that, but I was overstimulated, and I lost balance, and I paid a price.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget always, always appreciating the sky in Jerusalem,
Yeah.
night or day. It was something very unusual, the color and the quality of the sky. So the wonders, enjoy the trip. It's not all about um, dealing with stress.
No, no. And doing that helps alleviate the stress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Correct. I think so too.
Yeah. Well, thank you, John. I
Thank you, Simon.
loved this conversation. I knew I would enjoy it. I always do enjoy speaking with you, but this diving a little deeper, quite a lot deeper.
I enjoyed it tremendously myself as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, I appreciate your time and yeah, the conversation. Absolutely loved it. And well, do you know what? People can enjoy it. I loved it. So
Great.
it's a
Fantastic.
big tick in the box for me. Thanks very much, mate. Thank you.
Thank you.